Buckeyes and Hawkeyes haven't met that many times over the last couple of years. We can thank expansion, we can thank the pandemic, we can thank changing up the divisions, but just their first meeting since 2017 and the first in Columbus since 2013 as we welcome in Tony Gerdeman from BuckeyeHuddle.com. Gerd, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me here, Mark. Good to finally see Iowa back on the schedule.
Absolutely. If you go back to that 2013 game, the quarterback for Ohio State was Braxton Miller. It really does seem like it was 9 years ago. That seems like it was a lifetime ago for Ohio State. And obviously that 2017 meeting, as Ryan Day said today, that 2017 meeting still has a scar on the Buckeye coaching staff for the way Ohio State lost in Iowa.
Yeah, and you would think maybe it's the defensive coaches that should share the bulk of that blame, but he was part of it too, and they came out threw a pick six right away, and from there they were just couldn't get out of their own way. And yeah, that's one that I wonder if the scarring has been there for so long that they've not been able to exercise that demon, or however you want to say it. So it's like it's only been just sitting there festering, and however graphic you want to get, but now they can finally maybe address it and take some of that sting away.
Both of these teams coming off of a week off. Ryan Day, he never likes to talk about the health of the team, so he didn't really talk about that today either. We're assuming Jackson Smith-Njigba, Travion Henderson, and Mayan Williams will all be healthy to go. Jordan Hancock's questionable as well. Ohio State's coming off a week off. Iowa's coming off a week off, but these are two teams that are really going in opposite directions in terms of the national scheme.
Yeah, very much so. Iowa kind of reeling at this point, and I think maybe that's one of the things where they've had this, longevity at head coach where they can withstand these things and maybe stop from just reeling until the end of the season. It's going to be very difficult for them to stop that reeling this week. And Ohio State, as you said, this is the second half of the season. Ryan Day said the first half is done. That's over. Now it's the second half of the season, and that's where, as Jim Tressel used to say, November is for contenders. That's about where we're getting into, and it's the second half of the season that's going to determine the postseason for Ohio State. So, yeah, much different goals at this point. Iowa just trying to get a touchdown, Ohio State trying to get all of the touchdowns.
It's fascinating the way the Iowa offense has struggled. The defense has kept them into games. Are we talking up the Iowa defense too much, or is this Iowa defense really legitimately good?
The way that Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson talked about it, they certainly spoke with respect and reverence. And one of the interesting reasons why is they talk about how Iowa runs the same defense every year. So they have faced every single kind of offense. They know how Ohio State is going to try to attack this defense because they know their defense very well. They've seen how everybody else tries to attack it. They've seen how Ohio State type of teams have tried to attack it. So they prepare for that. So not only do they know what they do very, very well, they know how teams like Ohio State try to attack them because they have years and years and years of data and film and video to prepare them. So I think I don't think you could chalk the defense up enough. I think it's with the coaches, the way they talk, just the respect that they have. I think we probably should, fans should as well. And that doesn't mean that Ohio State's not going to score 42. It just means if they score 42, it's going to be darn difficult.
A month ago, Michigan's Jim Harbaugh said many of these same things about the Iowa defense, about how it's been consistently good ever since he was playing. And Michigan went out and only scored 27 against Iowa, their season low. So there is a lot of truth to this Iowa defense. Meanwhile, the Iowa offense, it's just putrid. Let's not make any bones about it. Half the time, the defense scores more points than the offense does for the Hawkeyes. And their offensive coordinator, Brian Ferentz, the son of the head coach, under fire. But it seems like the Ferentz father and son connection are digging their heels in, and they're not eager to make a change yet.
Yeah, it's pretty sad when you have to work so hard to score points. And I always say about college football, if you have a bad offense, it's by choice. Because you can look all around the nation and see fantastic offenses. Look at Tennessee, what they're doing with Josh Heupel. And it's a choice. And every time Iowa goes out there, they choose to score 14 points, 10 points. They may say they want to score more, but they're not doing anything to make that happen. And when Ohio State's coaches are asked about Iowa's offense, and the best thing they can say is, well, they've got two good tight ends. And they do. But when the first words come out about, well, they've got these skilled tight ends, that means there's nothing else there. And you can talk about scheme and the fundamentals and all that good stuff, but the talent isn't there. The playmaking for Spencer Petras, the quarterback, isn't there. Petras isn't there enough himself when he's got time to throw. That doesn't mean he's going to make a good throw. There's just so many problems with this offense, and it starts at the top. And everybody just in Iowa kind of ignores that fact, even though they get asked about it every single day that they talk with the media.
In many ways, 2022 is the year of the tight end. We've seen Ohio State use the tight end quite a bit. Luke Lachey is the tight end for the Iowa Hawkeyes. He's a Columbus kid, went to Grandview Heights, just less than a mile away from the Ohio State campus, basically. The son of Jim Lachey, the Ohio State All-American guard, who's the radio analyst for the Buckeyes. So how did Luke Lachey get out of Columbus and go to Iowa?
Yeah, that's an interesting story where Ohio State was looking at Luke Lachey, looking at Joe Royer, looking at a couple of others, and essentially chose Joe Royer over Luke Lachey, and Luke Lachey goes on to Iowa and is doing some good things there. Joe Royer really yet to play for the Buckeyes. So with the depth chart the way it is, and Royer's been hurt this year, but it was interesting to hear Ryan Day be asked about Luke Lachey on Tuesday, and have to. I'm not sure. I think Jim Lachey was probably in the room. He usually is. And so it was interesting to hear him say, like, yeah, I'm rooting for him. I really respect him, respect the family, proud of what he's doing there at Iowa. And yeah, it's just a little interesting question and answer there about a player that Ohio State certainly could have had if they wanted, but they wanted somebody else just a little bit better. And really, I talked to Tony Alford a couple of weeks ago about the difficulty in recruiting when you want a player, but you have no room for it. And he said it's the worst thing in the world. And I'm assuming that's what it was with Kevin Wilson, the tight ends coach and offensive coordinator.
The Ohio State fan base, I thought, has probably gotten a little spoiled with that run of defensive ends between Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, and then Chase Young. We were expecting that out of Zach Harrison. Hasn't quite been there. We've seen him get very productive on the inside the last couple of games. But then JT Tuimoloau was supposed to be the next great one. His production numbers aren't there, but he is making a major impact on opposing offenses.
Yeah, Jim Knowles trying not to get fined by the Big Ten when speaking in a roundabout way about how much JT Tuimoloau gets held during games. And as he said, even when he's not getting to the quarterback, he's impacting the quarterback. And whether that's being held, whether that's the quarterback leaving the pocket, whether that's him stepping up into Mike Hall's waiting arms, something like that. And the same can be said with Zach Harrison, who, if you watch him during a game, he doesn't have a sack yet, but he's impacting the game. He's impacting the quarterback. And to dovetail into a question about the safeties, and Jim Knowles said, yeah, we've got a lot more that we can do with the safeties. We can blitz them. We haven't had to do that yet because the front four is doing its job. So he's happy with what's going on with the front four. The sack numbers aren't really there. I think they have 14 sacks on the year in 6 games, but they're getting the kind of pressure that he wants, and they're forcing quick throws. They're forcing bad throws. They're forcing holds, that sort of thing. So he's happy with what they're doing. I think everybody else would just like to see more sacks in the box score because it's fun to talk about.
Ohio State, once again, big favorite over their opponent this weekend. Ryan Day continually talks about competitive stamina is what's going to keep Ohio State focused on these games that on paper should be blowouts. What does competitive stamina mean?
Competitive stamina means not going to Iowa in 2017 and losing 55-21 or whatever it was, stuff like that. Competitive stamina is you have a big win and you bounce right back and have you're prepared for another big game. They're coming off of a bye week this week. They've got the second half of the schedule coming up, and it starts right away with the tough defense. And then you just have to, it's as much about Ohio State viewing themselves and holding themselves to a standard as it is trying to beat Iowa or anything like that. They, everybody expects them to win, but they do have to perform like Ohio State is expected to. And that goes for this week, that goes for the next week, that goes for the week after that. Because say what you want about the Big Ten, the moment you let down, you can have a Purdue in 2018, you can have an Iowa in 2017. We saw Michigan have a 7-point game with Maryland a few weeks back. Like, these things can happen, and it's something that every coach is concerned about. That's all they think about, and it's what they try to avoid. And so, as much as they can preach it to their players until it finally sinks in, they're going to do it.
Ohio State and Iowa met for the first time 100 years ago. It's just the 5th game in Ohio Stadium, as the Buckeyes and Hawkeyes will renew that rivalry this Saturday. I want to thank our guest from BuckeyeHuddle.com, Tony Gerdeman. Tony, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.